Good morning, moms of Master Books. Hope you're having a fantastic week. It's good to be back. The last couple weeks, we've been attending conferences. So we attended the Teach Them Diligently conference in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Awesome. And then we attended the Nashville Teach Them Diligently conference. We got to see a lot of people from the group. We got to connect with people that we do ministry with. It was just a fantastic experience. So good to be back, though, in the seat and back in the office and to connect with this group that we love and cherish so much. So today for teaching tips, let's talk about the number one prayer that we as homeschoolers should be praying, but often forget. And I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. Oh, be sure to comment if you're here watching for a chance to have 2,500 reward points added to your account. I don't know how to do the who. So we've been part of homeschooling for a lot of years. I love the homeschool community. We love the culture. We love the families that are part of the culture, the kids. So much about the homeschooling movement is so near and dear to us. And for a lot of years, though, one of the things that I've noticed is something's missing in the homeschool community. So like 2 weeks ago, I was in Fayetteville and Eric Hoven was there. And I had Eric Hoven on in this with me live a little while back. We brought him on and he and I talked together. Eric holds a special place in my family's life, and that's part of the backstory. But let me tell you a funny story about Eric. So last week at Teach Them Diligently, as Eric tells the story, he came out of his hotel room at the Gaylord Hotel, which is a beautiful facility, and he saw Randy, me, walking down the hall away from him. So he thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sneak up behind him, and I'm going to give him a little pinch in the behind just to scare him. So he quietly snuck up behind me in the hall as I was walking and gave a little pinch. I turned around and all of a sudden Eric said, "You're not Randy." And he had walked up behind somebody and actually gave him a little pinch. And as he was telling Kristen and I the story, Kristen said, "There is no good way to say, hey, I thought you were Randy. I was trying to give a pinch to." So that was fun. Funny story about Eric. Eric is a good guy, and he is from the ministry Creation Today. And he was at the Teach Them Diligently in Fayetteville. And one of the things that he was doing was he was taking like propane, putting it in water with dish soap, and it would fill the bubbles with propane. And then the kids would take it and he'd light it up, and it'd go, a big flame would come up, and it was pretty dramatic. And my kids were very drawn to the booth, and they enjoyed being part of it. And I went over to the booth and I was talking with him about what he does and what his passion is. And a mom came up and she had two kids with her, and they were older kids. And you could just tell that they were really, really good kids, right? They were well-mannered. They were well-spoken. They were appropriate at all levels. But as the mom was talking, the thing that she kept saying is, "I just want my kids to have a passion for God. I want my kids to have a passion." And you could kind of see it was almost this missing puzzle that was there. And that's the missing piece. In the homeschool community, we have a lot of really good kids. They're good churchies. They're good citizens. They're good. They're just good people. But there's that one component that's still missing. And even after all the years of being involved in homeschool, for 20 years, we've been involved in homeschool community, and I'm watching a lot of the kids become adults, and this piece that's still missing. And as Eric was talking about his passion, it resonated with us because a few years ago, we had gone to a mega conference, and two of my kids were in a youth track. And Eric was actually the speaker in the youth track. And I've never been somebody who was big on youth ministries. or farming my kids out, if you will. But we let the kids go to the youth track, and after one session, we all came back together as a family, and my kids were just bawling. And it was a remarkable thing, because as Eric was talking, and what he was talking about was the glory of God. In that session, the Lord had revealed himself to both of my children, and that revelation just broke them. And it was amazing to see this occurrence that had occurred in them, where all of a sudden God had revealed himself to them, and they had a fresh fire or a passion for God. And it was a life-changing event. So as Eric was talking a couple weeks ago, and I'm seeing him light up these kids with propane, and we were talking about his passion, which is igniting a passion for the glory of God. That's what his heart is. I began to look around, and I see this young family, and I see these kids, and I start noticing what we as homeschoolers do is we're really good at preparing our kids. So let me bring it to a Bible context. Israel Wayne and I were also talking about this, and Israel said it's like Mount Carmel, and that's exactly, this is like the perfect illustration. So if you're not familiar with Mount Carmel, let me familiarize. King Ahab and Jezebel were in power. Elijah the prophet, he was stirring up trouble for them, but they were leading a nation away from God. And so we come to this place where Elijah has a confrontation with Ahab. So it's 1 Kings 18, and starting at verse 16. So Obadiah went to tell Ahab that Elijah had come, and Ahab went out to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw him, he exclaimed, "So is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?" Now you think homeschoolers fit this bill so well, right? Because popular culture would even say, you who go against the system, you troublemakers, the homeschoolers, you troublemakers. Okay. Elijah says, "I've made no trouble for Israel." He says, "You and your family are the troublemakers, for you've refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshiped the images of Baal instead." Isn't that so homeschooling? Like, somebody will say, "You guys are just troublemakers," and the homeschoolers would say, "We're not troublemakers. It's you who are defying God and raising your children under the counsel of the ungodly and making decisions to go against the commands that God has given." So I love the symbolism in that. Okay. He says, Elijah says to Ahab, "Now summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with 450 products of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who are supported by Jezebel." So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. When Elijah stood in front of them, he said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Then Elijah said, "I am the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever they wish, and cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood of the altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then I will call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God." And all people agreed. So you see this? He's saying we're going to build 2 altars. You prepare your altar, I'll prepare my altar. You call out to your God, I'm going to call out to my God. The God who sends fire is the God we will serve. Very powerful confrontation setting up here. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "You go first, for there are many of you. Choose the bull and prepare it. Call on the name of your God, but do not set fire to the wood." So they prepared one of the bulls and placed it on the altar. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar that they had made. About noontime, this is a riot. About noontime, Elijah began mocking them. You'll have to shout louder, he scoffed, for surely he is a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming. Or no, perhaps he's relieving himself. Oh, that's funny that that's in the Bible. Or maybe he is away on a trip, or he is asleep and needs to be awakened. And so they shouted louder, and following their custom, they cut themselves with knives and sword until blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice, but still there was no sound, no reply, no response. To me, that's so symbolic of the culture that we have, where the education system has prepared this elaborate humanistic sacrifice and waiting for it to come alive, and all we see is no life. Then Elijah called to the people, come over here. And they all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar, large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar and cut the bull into pieces, and he laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, fill 4 jars with water and pour the water over the offering and the wood. And after he'd done this, he said, do the same thing again. And then when they were finished, he said, now do it a 3rd time, so that when they did as he said, the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. So there was no denying that Elijah's altar was not just constructed with timber and the bull and everything that it needed to be, but that it was also drenched, and that the odds were even more impossible. At the usual time for the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know you. O Lord, our God, that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to yourself. And immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God. So here's my observation in the homeschool community. There are a lot of prepared altars. We're good at building altars. We choose the right curriculum, the right environment. We take away friends who are bad influences. We cut out family members who are bad influences. We don't watch Disney movies. We do everything that we can to make sure that the altar is built and prepared properly. And when we attend conventions, we learn about how to build altars, how to make sure the stones are right, how to make sure the lamb or the bull is cut up in proper chunks and set just right. And so what we're seeing is a lot of really prepared altars in the homeschool community, not in specifics, in general. So follow me. We have a lot of really prepared altars. Some of you may be really prepared altars. You are homeschooled, you've been discipled and trained. But what we sometimes forget to do is to ask God to prove himself, to reveal himself. See, in the same way that my kids went and listened to Eric, and as he talked about the glory of God, God did something supernatural, something miraculous, in that he revealed himself to them. And the moment he showed up, everything changed in their lives, right? That's what we need in the homeschool movement. Our curriculum choices are so important. The environment that we have is so important. But what we really need, is God to show up. And sometimes, and I forget this, and as I was sitting there and I'm watching Eric light kids up on fire physically, and I'm looking at these kids that are so beautiful and so good, but there's just that piece missing. It's like, as soon as God shows up, exactly what happened. Immediately the fire flashed from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones. It even licked up the water in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and they cried out, "The Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God." My cry. Kristen asked what I was going to talk about because I'm in a crying mood anyways. I said I'm going to talk about the glory of God, but I don't intend to cry. And she's like, yeah, good luck. My cry is that all these prepared altars, that we as parents and we as leaders in the homeschool community would begin to step back from the altar, step back from the building for a moment and say, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you are Lord, that you are the God who brings them back to himself." And so while we have all these altars and they're so prepared, and it's so important that we prepare for the glory of God, it's only God himself who can bring the glory. And so my prayer is that we begin asking for that. As we begin to see these young hearts become sensitive to the things of God, and we begin to see their faith growing as they study the apologetics and all of that. We are so excited here at the Press to see the testimonies that are beginning to happen as your kids are beginning to get fired up. May I just encourage you to step back from the altar for a moment and say, "Okay, Lord, it's time for you to come. Reveal yourself to my children. The supernatural, the power that only you can bring." And just like Elijah, when that happens, we're beginning to see, when that happens in my kids' lives or other people's lives, immediately they change the atmosphere around them, the environment around them, because now the power and the glory of God is being displayed through them. So that's the prayer that we forget. And the prayer that I would ask that you begin to pray over your children. Lord, reveal yourself to my child as I prepare the altar. Prove today that everything that I have done is at your command, because you said to train them up in the way they should go. You said to disciple them, to protect them, to lead them. And so I've done all of that, and I've stepped out in sacrifice. But I can't be God. I can only prepare the altar and ask God to come and reveal himself to them. Maybe today even you have something in your life like mine where there's a situation that is beyond what human capability can explain or even solve. And maybe even it's time for us to step back and just say, "God, prove yourself. Prove that you are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." If you and your family don't know about the miracle of Abraham, the miracle of Isaac, and the miracle of Jacob, what God did as he made promises and began moving through their lives, I would encourage you to learn and study that, because there are so many, we understand so much about the character of God in the way that he dealt with the nation Israel, and that we can have an understanding in the way that he's dealing with us. So that's my teaching tip for today. I want all of our children to be intellectually smart, but more importantly than that, I want them to possess the glory of God in their lives, for them to know him, not just to know about him, but to know him, and then all the skills that we're building to be able to communicate that effectively to the world around them. And only God can perform that miracle. All right. Well, hopefully this was a blessing. We have a lot of new curriculum in place. So the next few weeks, I'll be talking a lot about like the new zoology course, the World Story 3 course. Just a lot that we've been talking about is actually starting to drop and really good. So we were talking about that. On the website, we implemented a new change. Now, when you go to a product page, like if you go to Math Lessons 1, Math for a Living Education Level 1, there is now above the buy button, you can choose the format that you want. So before, when you used to go into the search engine, you would have to kind of have downloads, digital downloads with physical copies, and it was all kind of messy. We've now changed it so that when you go to the one product page, you can select you want the digital download or the physical. I think we fixed most of the PayPal issues. So if you're having issues with PayPal, you may want to try logging out of your account and then logging back in to the Master Books website. But most of those issues have been resolved as well. Praise the Lord. And the convention season is underway. We hope to see more of you at conventions. Thankfully, Kristen and I are done. We only do 2 conventions a year, and those are exhausting. But we so enjoyed it. And if you stopped by, we so enjoyed meeting you and your family. All right. Well, God bless you and your weekend. And I am beginning to pray over your families that the Lord will begin to prove himself. I pray that you would pray that prayer over my family and over those of us at the press, and that we would begin to see the power of God as well as the academics and all that we want to see for our kids. God bless you guys. Have a great weekend.